Awesome. We're live on YouTube.
Where will you share the link?
Hello, YouTube.
Hi.
Putting the YouTube link in the chat, not in the waiting room. There you go.
Thank you. And if you'll make me host, please.
Will do. There you go. All the best, guys.
Thank you. And we're on LinkedIn streaming as well now.
Getting sophisticated, eh?
Okay, and Liesl, I'm going to leave and I'm going to just watch my Telegram for a couple of minutes to make sure that nothing breaks as I leave. Eh? So if there's any issues, you'll let me know. But all the best, guys. Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you. Okay, we've got quite a number of people in the waiting room. I'm going to give it 1 minute and then we'll welcome and admit people. Your phones are on mute, silence.
Yes.
I'm admitting. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We are going to wait a few minutes just to allow everybody to join us, and we'll start at about 2 minutes past 10 with our masterclass this morning. We have Tania and Shane with us. I don't know if you want to say hi quickly, Tania and Shane.
Hi, everyone.
Well, morning to everybody and to anybody who's not in Africa Central Time or South Africa Central Time, maybe afternoon or even evening, but morning.
Absolutely. Yes, we have a global audience once again, and we are always very excited to welcome everybody to our masterclasses. Please do say hi in the chat and tell us where you are from. I'm still admitting more people, and we'll get going in a minute's time. So just say hi in the chat, and may we also ask that you just mute yourselves. We are live on YouTube as we speak, and I'm going to start recording now as well. So we'll appreciate your cooperation with staying muted. And also, I will remind everybody of this when we do the formal welcome, is that you will be invited to ask questions in the Zoom chat. We are going to keep a close eye on that. And also, when we pick up on anything pertinent, I'll bring it to our guest speaker's attention. In addition to that, we are also going to have a Q&A at the end of this session. So we're giving it another minute or so, and then we'll get going. Please continue saying hi. I'm still admitting quite a lot of people, Tania and Shane.
That's fantastic.
An app called QuickTime Player. You could try searching the App Store.
Dorcas, please mute yourself. Thank you. If we can ask everybody just to stay muted, that would be highly appreciated. We are live streaming and we are recording. Alice, if I could ask that you mute, please. Thank you. I'm still admitting people. Just say hi in the chat and let us know where you are from. Also, while we are still allowing people to join us, the best way to view us here this morning is to put your Zoom view in either side-by-side speaker view so that you can see the speakers all the time with the presentation being shared, or side-by-side gallery view. That is the best way to see what the speakers are showing us, and then you can keep your eye on the speakers as well. Okay, just a few more seconds. I'm still admitting people. We've got quite a few new people joining us here, Shane and Tania. It's a very unique and specific topic, this. And I know for a fact you're going to get a lot of value from this morning. And we'll kick off. Okay, still more people coming in. Let me just see where people are. There we go. I'm still admitting people. Quite a few people still joining us. And while we are waiting for more people to join us, I think it's a good time to start. Tania and Shane, do you agree that we get going?
Yes,
Yeah.
let's jump into it.
Let's get going. So a very warm welcome to everybody. I'm going to continue admitting people. So if I get a little bit distracted here this morning, we are a small team this morning due to school holidays, etc. I would like to welcome you and thank you for taking time out to join us here this morning with our guest speakers, Tania Rhode and Shane Radford. What I would like to ask is that you just mute yourself. We are live streaming to YouTube as we speak, and we are recording this session so that we can share all the masterclass events and assets with you after this morning's event. So we are going to have a Q&A session. I know that Tania and Shane's going to pause at specific places during their presentation and invite you to ask questions. We are also inviting you to post questions in the Zoom chat. I will keep my eye close on that, and I know Shane and Tania is doing exactly the same, and we will definitely come back to all your questions at the end of the presentation or when it is applicable. Give me a moment just to introduce Tania and Shane to you. They are going to unravel this whole mystery open up a whole new world of opportunity to us in how we view BEE, how you will benefit from it as well as an entrepreneur and as an organization. So they're going to use their experience and their expertise to share some strategies and systems and some ideas with you, and also one of the initiatives that is taking place at the moment, which you might want to participate in. So they will not only introduce you to BEE, they will be awakening us this morning. Just a quick reminder, please do mute yourself. We are live recording and we are also live streaming. And then in addition to that, also please ask questions and participate with comments in the chat. Tania, with that, it's over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Liesl, for the introductions, and welcome everyone. It's going to be an exciting masterclass. Really looking forward to hosting you guys with Shane, where we will be demystifying the complexities around BBBEE and just understanding the various opportunities that actually await you with regards to the world of BEE. I'm going to jump right into it. Many businesses in South Africa have had to comply with BBBEE, and a lot of them do see this as an indirect tax. It becomes a huge expense to implement BBBEE to achieve the desired level that they want to obtain. And it really does. What I've found in my experience is that a lot of companies find it and see it as a complex thing to implement, and it's a tick box exercise, but it doesn't really have to be a tick box exercise. We can ensure true transformation and economic development by ensuring that when we're implementing BBBEE, we need to be guided in terms of not just ticking that box, but how do we actually implement projects, spend on projects that are going to really have an impact on communities, on our unemployed youth, on all the beneficiaries that really fall under the BEE umbrella. So it doesn't, yes, it is an expensive exercise, but it can really be an impactful exercise that one can embark on. Don't you agree, Shane?
So Tania, yes, thanks. And certainly if you look at how old BEE is, it's evolved and changed quite dramatically. Did you see any major impacts to the implementation of BEE and a shift to more strategic use of it from during COVID and post-COVID?
Definitely, a lot of companies thought that, and a lot of people that I engaged with thought that because of COVID and with lockdown, that BE had to come to a halt. And there were a number of companies who actually had hoped it would come to a halt because of the expense. But I have seen a major shift with regards to how companies are now looking at implementing BBBEE. And the shift that has come about is that, with the pandemic, it's really forced companies to not look at their employees as a number anymore, but to really look at investing in them and looking at just what the pandemic has done across the world and how it's impacted small businesses specifically, how it's impacted communities where people have lost many jobs. And I have seen a shift, not as big a shift as I would have liked to have seen, but I have definitely see a shift across companies and them just looking at how can they actually start making their money count. Yes, they need to achieve these points, they need to incur the spend, but how can they actually spend on their own employees? And if they are going to be spending on unemployed individuals, how can they really make sure that it counts? So I have seen a shift in the mindset. And I think thanks to COVID, I think we wouldn't have seen the shift if COVID didn't force companies to start actually being more empathetic.
So as an educated guest, what percentage of corporates would you say before COVID and post-COVID see BE as a strategic imperative now? Do you think is it 20%, 30%, 50%? Perception I had pre-COVID, I think probably 20 to 30% of corporates saw it perhaps as strategic. Do you have a different view?
I honestly think that it hasn't, in terms of the percentage, it hasn't increased as much as we would have liked it to increase. I would say maybe by 5 to 10%, we've only seen that increase come through. But I do think that going forward, a lot more companies are now starting to shift. I can see it in the skills development space, that a lot more are now looking at programs and saying, why are we implementing this program? What is the outcome? What is these learners who have gone on this program, how has it actually benefited them and improved their life or their families' lives? So I do see that in the next 2 years, hopefully, there is going to be a much bigger shift from what we're currently seeing at the moment, because everyone is still moving out of, the lockdown phase. I'm starting to see a lot more companies being comfortable now in having face-to-face meetings. So I do foresee that there's going to be more shift going forward.
Yeah, I've seen the same, and I think it's encouraging.
Definitely. And, it really is about just the impact that companies need to realize that they have by implementing BE and what that impact can mean to the ordinary person on the street. If we look at BE and understand what world of opportunity are we talking about, how is this a world of opportunity and how can it not just be a tick box exercise? What I have seen is that, specialists like myself that's in the skills development space, specialists that are in the BE consulting space, we really have to be the ones that are encouraging companies and showing them exactly how can we put their money where their mouths are and really implement projects that are going to have a far-reaching, feel in terms of just developing communities. Companies are also now starting to see it as a mechanism to build talent pipelines. So in the past, a lot of companies, especially your bigger organizations, they have no choice but to comply with BBBEE. And what happens in their cases is that they are forced to implement learnerships across unemployed youth. And unemployed youth where, they actually don't have the capacity to take these unemployed youth and bring them into the organization to gain the practical work experience that goes with learnerships. So they depend on training providers, they depend on other NGOs and institutions to help them to host these learners. But changing the mind shift around that is very important, because companies should actually understand they can implement BBBEE with unemployed youth, but they can ensure that they're actually putting them on programs that feed right back into their business. So this way, they're actually creating a talent skills pool and building these youth to actually bring them into as future employees and graduates that they can develop further into their organizations. I think also for SME accelerators and business growth, it's beneficial to the economy. because of the pandemic, you know, a lot of small businesses have lost their income. They've had to close their doors. But I do think that had we known prior to the pandemic, or had we seen the shift prior to the pandemic, that BEE can really be impactful, I think we could have saved a lot more SMEs through the various ecosystems that we'll unpack later in our discussion. And also just addressing unemployment through programs like the YES program that is that falls under BBBEE, and your learnerships. You know, we can definitely make transformation and just develop the socioeconomic of within our company, within our country, and through BBBEE. So there is just large amounts of opportunity that sit within this legislation.
So it sounds like there's obviously a lot of capability, policy, legislation, initiatives, incentives in place. If I look at the global world, you know, there's a massive shift to the gig economy. There's a shift to the average person doing more than one job at a time. Obviously, with COVID, we've had a massive loss of jobs. We've also had the need for people to be able to work remotely and from home and work in different ways. Your view on the ability for BEE to support this new way of working in the future, the new gig economy, does it support that, or are there constraints, or you know, what's preventing people from implementing these new ways of working as well as implementing BEE?
Really good question. I think the only obstacle is education. I've really found that, you know, going through this past few years and implementing BBBEE and making use of the opportunity for myself as well with my business, and bringing other smaller businesses into that ecosystem, I think the only challenge is education. I've spoken to many small businesses, small Black businesses, for which Black economic empowerment was put in place to really develop them. And I found that almost 80% of them have no idea about how BEE works. And you find that the understanding of BEE is actually sitting with the bigger corporations. And that's actually, it's the wrong way around. We should be educating SMEs and NGOs in understanding BEE and understanding what opportunities lie there. And I really think that it is the lack of education. I've come across many small businesses who I've had to educate in terms of just explaining to them, approach, you can actually, as a Black-owned business, you can approach any organization to be able to tap into possible money within the BEE spend. And I think that BEE consultants also have a role to play in educating companies around speaking to their supply chains. Why don't you engage with your supply chain? You know, I had one conversation about 2-3 years ago with one of my clients who assisted me with funding under supplier development. And I said to them, what, you know, like when I approached them and asked them for assistance, they said to me, they're so happy that I actually approached them, because they feel so ashamed to have to approach their Black suppliers because they feel like they don't want it to come across as a charity case. And it's really important for companies to realize it's not a charity case. These businesses need that growth. They need that injection of whether it's coaching or monetary value. They need that guidance in terms of understanding how can this open up opportunities for them. So education around this is vitally important. And I think that we should all start striving towards just educating the various SMEs, NGOs about this. And that's exactly why we're doing this masterclass.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the ability to start to think from the outside in. So everybody kind of expects the corporates to drive the process, and it almost feels like a procurement kind of exercise. But if we kind of do the outside in and we start to collaborate, educate the ecosystem, then we can start to work together and make a bigger impact, and not rely just on a few corporate players to do that. So that's exciting. Thank you.
And it's exactly that. It's building the ecosystem. And I think that within the BEE space and the skills development space, everyone still sees it as very disjointed. And it shouldn't be disjointed. It actually integrates very well. And there's many projects. You can take one project and you can actually benefit a large community in the unemployed individuals, while one company is actually scoring on their BEE points. So it's a win-win situation. That leads me into the next discussion point, which is enterprise and supplier development. And so these are pillars within the scorecard. And this is exactly where the opportunities lie. If you look at enterprise development, what is an enterprise development beneficiary? So in terms of this, a company, if you look at any SME or any company, for as a matter of fact, they can approach any other company out there that they are not currently supplying a service to. And they can apply for funding under enterprise development under enterprise development. They then become an enterprise development beneficiary if that company provides them with funding. And so I'm going to give a practical example of this. I've never done work with Vodacom, for example. So nothing stops me from approaching Vodacom and saying to Vodacom, I'm a Black-owned business, I'm 100% female-owned, and my business is all about skills development and assisting companies in taking the compliance issues away and just removing that red tape. But let me help you as an organization to structure your skills development initiatives in a much more impactful manner. I'm not a supplier to you, but consider me as an enterprise development beneficiary. And I think, what's really important here is helping SMEs and entrepreneurs just understanding the lingo and how they tap into this. Because if you don't speak the BEE lingo or throw these terms of enterprise development beneficiary in, then most often a company would not really consider you. But the minute you start speaking the BEE lingo, it then opens up another door, and it's like, okay, actually, yes, I can put you in touch with my procurement manager, my transformation manager, or my BEE consultant, or even my skills development specialist. And so me as a company, I can indicate, it's very important when you're applying as enterprise development beneficiary that you're indicating what is it that you need assistance for. And as a small business, that can be a monetary value, or it doesn't have to be a monetary value. So, for example, I know small businesses where I've guided them and said, you're struggling to pay your rental. You don't really need to be in this fancy office. Let me introduce you to another organization who I know is looking for enterprise beneficiaries. And we then do the introduction. And that company I know, for example, has quite a large amount of space because of COVID. Half of the staff are now working remotely. So spaces have opened up now. And they are then able to open up that space and say, we will give you office space. You don't have to pay a cent to us. And that benefits that small business because they're then able to take that money that they were spending on the rental and channel it into some area within operations or to help grow their business. On the company side, where they're trying to score the BEE points, they are now not taking any rental from this small organization. But if the cost to rent out that space is about 10,000 Rand, they can put that through as enterprise development beneficiary spend because they would have been incurring, they would have been receiving a revenue for that. So that can become an expense for the company, and for the small business, they're benefiting because now they're within an organization and utilizing their space. And that's enterprise development beneficiary, and it opens up so many opportunities for smaller businesses. And it really is just in how they approach a company and how they need to throw in the lingo to be able to tap into that.
So I think I want to just quickly mention there's a couple of chats at the moment, some asking how do we reach the corporates and position ourselves, and also some other practitioners who are obviously passionate about the subject who are also saying and sharing their capabilities. And I think part of our message is how do we collaborate together as an ecosystem? How do we work together as practitioners? How do we work together as corporates and organizations? And how do we work together as beneficiaries? What are the 2 or 3 things that the corporates and the practitioners and the beneficiaries are getting right that you've seen, and how do we amplify that? What are some of the opportunities there? Because already people are saying we can do things, but I think it's a fragmentation that's the challenge. What have you seen working out there that can help us with this?
So I've really seen if I look at, and again, I'm going to use myself as an example, my business is purely focused on skills development, but helping companies to maximize their points under the skills development element. But what I do is when I'm engaging with companies, I'm opening up the understanding of how do we score your BE points. And when I'm having that discussion, I say to the companies, this is the idea that I have. I understand what service you're offering, what your core business is about, but I would like to actually engage with your BE consultant, because once I engage with the BE consultant, I'm then able to get them to understand that, it doesn't have to be a tick box exercise. Remember, with triple BE, there's a lot of organizations that have come up, BE consulting companies that have come up and been registered as consulting firms, but they have only learned the tick boxing exercise. And only through experience do they then start understanding the impact that these types of initiatives can have. So I do think that, by me as a skills development specialist, and I appeal to other skills development specialists, when you're engaging with your companies, speak to your BE consultants, sit down with them and see how can you actually implement a project where it's going to be benefiting a community. And you can only do that when you collaborate with BE consultants. So what I've done is I've started collaborating and partnering with a number of BE consulting firms, because as a specialist in skills development, you're not restricted to only work with one BE consulting firm. And likewise, with BE consulting firms, you're not restricted to only working with one skills development specialist. So I think that collaboratively, if all of us can come together and sit down and look and unpack, so I can sit down with a BE company and say, let's look at building a database so I can bring through a lot of these small businesses and let's build a database so that when you have a company that is in agriculture and I have an SME who's doing phenomenal things on the ground, let's do an introduction so that we give them access to market and the businesses, the measured entity can score their BE points. But that has to come from collaborating between the specialists in the field. I can't see it working only from the company's point of view. It has to come from us as the specialists.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think what you've explained is through collaboration, being open, you've actually grown the opportunity for yourself, for the beneficiaries, and demonstrated value to the corporates. Any idea of how much money and investment that has been spent actually makes it to the beneficiaries directly? There's a perception that potentially only 10 cents in the rand results in something sustainable. So there's a lot of interventions, there's a lot of work being done, there's a lot of good intent, but how much money is actually reaching the beneficiaries and how much of it is having a true impact? How many net new businesses, as an example, are corporates creating? Any insights around that or any views on it?
I can tell you that billions have already been invested into skills development, into communities, but when we're looking at the actual value to rand spent, I think we do need a lot of work and there is a long road to achieving that. Unfortunately, with everything, there are always people that would look at getting that extra buck when they shouldn't actually be taking that extra buck, and it should be going down to the beneficiaries. So there is a long road that we have to travel towards that. But again, I think, there are a lot of BE consulting firms out there now who really see that value in what how BE can really transform and build social economics within our country. And I think that we have to continuously host sessions like these and go out and just be activists and talk about this and get companies to move towards being cognizant about what consulting companies are they using, and are these consulting companies actually ensuring that the beneficiaries are benefiting from this. And I have seen a shift in the past year. I've seen a shift from a number of multinationals as well as your medium to large organizations where they're stopping and saying, hang on, we don't just want to spend the money like this. Where's our money actually going to? And can you show us? And I've seen a number of them actually moving away from consulting firms who can't show them where the money is going to and just taking it in management consulting fees. So I think that we just need to continue that momentum in shifting from just the tick box exercise over to creating that impact.
Yeah, it's exciting that the corporates are starting to look for outcomes and outputs. And I think as an ecosystem, again, both as beneficiaries, but also as practitioners, if we can start to drive more of the kind of metrics, let's set a goal, let's identify the outcomes, let's make sure we've got a clear direction, and then let's report on it. And perhaps it's something we should take back to the policymakers. Can we start to introduce impact measures in a more consistent way, not just what's been spent.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And that is the next step that I'm also going to be looking at, is chatting to the policymakers, because at the moment, B-BBEE, skills development, where the SETA sit, and your employment equity is completely disjointed. The legislations don't integrate, they don't speak to each other, and that is something that has to be addressed to facilitate this. So moving on to supplier development. Supplier development is basically progressing from it being an enterprise development beneficiary, where you had never provided a service to a company before, to now where you are actually in their supply chain. So once you're in a supply chain of an organization and you're now supplying services to them, you can tap into funding under supplier development. And again, it's a matter of approaching your company, your clients that you are providing a service to, and engaging with them and saying to them that I am a black supplier, and this is the service I've been providing to you for, let's say, for 6 months. How can I be considered as a supplier development beneficiary? And again, every company that is being measured under B-BBEE has to spend on supplier development. So what a lot of people don't realize is that companies who are going through the BEE process and are looking for all of those points, you can actually, a company can obtain bonus points from progressing an enterprise development beneficiary to a supplier beneficiary. So again, a quick example on this. One of my clients is in recruitment. They are specialists in temporary employment services. And so I approached them and I said to them, look, what's happening with your enterprise development spend and your supplier development spend, and had a discussion on that. And I remember, I'm not the BE consultant, and just had this discussion with them. And I said to them, well, I've got a fantastic company who they've implemented the YES program, my client. And I said to them, let's take some of those YES candidates and place them into small black businesses, which we've done successfully. It's our 2nd year now. And this one particular company is in the arts and entertainment industry and film industry, which has absolutely nothing to do with recruitment. And I then said to the company, we've got this YES learners that have been placed there, and it really has helped them, because as a small business in this entertainment space, they have really been impacted with COVID. So we placed the learners beginning of January 2020. They had to retrench 2 of their permanent staff. But because of the YES learners being placed by them, they were actually then able to survive during COVID because they had the YES learners placed by them. I then approached the company my client approached me and said, can we give them enterprise development spend? And I said, of course you can. Nothing stops you from doing that. That would greatly help them, because they actually are looking at moving into a new premises for their training academy side. And they then gave them spend, and that was in November last year, which really helped them. And then in January, I approached my client again and I said, so they are an enterprise beneficiary now. How can we progress them to a supplier development? And I said, so life has gone online now, and a lot of meetings happen online, and not everybody is used to working online. This particular SME is, they are in the entertainment space, so they're used to being in front of the camera, and they are an accredited training provider in the acting space. So why not, let's bring them in and let them do a 4-hour training session with your management, teaching them about online presence within meetings, what to do, what not to do, how to handle technical issues. And by just having this 4-hour session, you're able to progress them, get bonus points for progressing them to becoming now a supplier to you. And once they are a supplier, you can then give them another donation in terms of assisting them with their development. So, and their, with regards to their growth and development. So that is ways that you can integrate both enterprise and supplier development and progress an SME from being a company that has never provided a service to a company that now becomes part of that supply chain. So, these are the types of opportunities that we're looking at.
So just one of the things that I've certainly perceived over the last 5-10 years, there's a big focus on emerging EME entities, as well as then the qualified QSEs. And a big part of BE is obviously about enabling and helping the small and the micro enterprises. How successful and how could we go about helping more EMEs and some of these micro small entities? The perception is, obviously on the supply chain side, there aren't a lot of EMEs normally in the supply chain. I know it's a challenge. So yeah, just give us some views on that, please. How do we solve that? Who's getting it right? What are the things we could do across the ecosystem?
So again, it's just educating the EMEs and really giving them a lot of guidance. So I've recently been giving, over the past 2-3 months now, a lot of advice to NGOs as well as to other EMEs in just understanding how do you structure that initial email that you're sending to a company that you would like to do business with. And just by structuring that email and speaking the BEE lingo again, which we touched on earlier, you're able to get that foot in the door to have that conversation with that company. So I really, again, I can't stress the point about educating the EMEs on how they can gain access to markets and how they can build their confidence in terms of speaking to these companies that have to comply with BEE. And I think that, it's about education, because a lot of the EMEs and entrepreneurs, they are specialists in their field and their service that they want to offer. They don't know how to, and they become very nervous when they have to bring in the BEE element. And I think it's really about educating and building their confidence so that they can confidently walk in or confidently send that email to an organization or pick up the phone and ask, can I speak to your procurement manager? Because the procurement manager is the person who is actually dealing with managing who is in the supply chain and what are the potentially new businesses that are coming in. So one thing that I've started also seeing a change in is with your procurement managers and companies. They are now starting to say that because what has happened in the past is a company that has never provided a service and is an enterprise development beneficiary remains an enterprise development beneficiary for a number of years. So this company A would be getting this fund from the enterprise development spend, and next year the company would contact them again and say, do you need spend? We've got 50,000 to give to you, so we're just giving it to you. We don't actually care what you're doing with the money. We just want to get our points. And again, the following year they do the same. So in that way, there's no true economic development there. And now I'm starting to see a change where companies are saying, and procurement managers are saying, okay, but we've provided funding to this organization in our previous year. How is that money? So they'll start engaging with that EME and saying, what did you do with the money that we actually provided you with? And if you as an EME are out there and trying to gain access, or you are gaining access to this type of money, don't be greedy, is as simple terms as I can put it. If you are going to be questioned in the following year as to what you did with that money and can you show how it actually benefited you, then you are going to be in a better position to gain more development and assistance from that company. But if you can't show what you've done with that money and you just went and spent it on a new car, or you bought a new house, or you went on a holiday, and you can't account for that, and this does happen, I must point out, it does happen. What are the chances that company is ever going to look at you again? So, and I think that when you become a beneficiary, you need to show that company and don't let them just give you money and your communication with them stops there. Engage with them further. Tell them that, wow, this money has really assisted me. This is where my business has grown. This is how far I've come. Gosh, I do need assistance now to get to the next level. So EMEs, QSEs need to start having a bit more engagement with the companies that are assisting them with money.
Sorry, Tania. So I think the opportunity for the practitioners in the market is to start to find ways to provide shared services. So one of the biggest challenges the EMEs and even quite a lot of QSEs, frankly, struggle with is just corporate governance. The corporates and the larger enterprises are not going to procure from a business that doesn't have governance in place, doesn't have the right structures in place, don't have those standards, and that's costly, and it's also difficult to implement. So yeah, I think one of the opportunities must be for the practitioners to work together, and for the beneficiaries, for your point, is take accountability, take responsibility for what needs to be done. Let's look at the slide you're on now. The opportunity, if I just ask the question quickly, if you want to quantify the value, the SARS collects just over 200 billion rand a year from corporates for tax. So effectively, if every corporate, including the small organizations, contributed 2% and 1% of net profit, so 3% of their net profit, we potentially have 6 billion rand per annum plus available every year to do meaningful development. So maybe on that basis, let me hand it back to you and ask, how's this being deployed and how effective is it, and how do we enable everybody to benefit from the intent of that amount of funding for development?
Yeah. So, it's probably even much more than 6 billion rand that's being invested into this. But again, it's all disjointed. Every BE consulting firm is only looking out for themselves, and rightfully so when you are a business. But I think that mind shift has to change. It definitely has to change. The pie is just so big that you're not going to lose out on revenue for your business. It's so huge that you can create these ecosystems where we start collaborating with each other. I mean, what I normally do is where I have small businesses, and I've got one, for example, that's has a wonderful project where they are able to place a machine in a community, and this machine is able to actually produce water that the community can actually drink. And at the same time, a company can fund this equipment being placed there, but there's a program that would go with this equipment being placed there. And what that program would do is that it would identify someone from the community that would run this program and be able to utilize this machine to produce the bottled water. But you can't just take anyone out of the community and expect them to run a business. It's not easy. Coming from an entrepreneur who has been in business now for a number of years, it's not easy. There are constant challenges every single day. And when you grow, that challenges just grow phenomenally as well. So many of these projects fail because there's no sustainability. There's no support structures being given to the small businesses. We have to change that. And you can change that through BEE. If we're looking at where a company is providing funding under supplier development or enterprise development, yes, they're scoring their points. So if you look at that 2%, it's 2% of their net profit after tax, and they would get 10 points for supplier development. Under enterprise development, they would get 5 points for implementing and spending on that. And then, as I mentioned, the bonus point where you progress your enterprise development beneficiary to a supplier development beneficiary. Now, just going back to that water project, you cannot expect a project like that to be sustainable when you're taking someone from the community and giving them this big role and giving them an opportunity to run a business of their own, and you're not giving them support. So this is where skills development also then comes in. Skills development comes in where the company that is paying for placing that equipment for under enterprise development, they can then pay towards a training program that upskills this entrepreneur now in understanding how to effectively run the business, how to manage costs, how to manage resources, but also how to sell. Because remember, that's a bottling, it's a water producing equipment. They can then not only benefit the community, but they can also then start producing bottled water. But they need the guidance in order to sustain that business. And that is where a lot of these projects fail, because the sustainability is not there. Companies throw money at it and they forget about the project and they move on. And that is where this ecosystem comes in terms of bringing enterprise development, supplier development, skills development, and your socioeconomic development. And that's what the next point that I'm actually going to be talking on. It's just building these ecosystems. It's very important to look at it holistically and not in silos.
Yeah, I think one of the questions again was around CSI, or according to the codes, more recently socioeconomic development as well. There's an opportunity to take advantage of the massive spend per Clayton's comment around how much the large corporates, the listed companies, are spending on corporate social responsibility types of projects. So there's a clear trend at the top, which is fantastic. But to your point, we've got to shift away from the short-termism, where we're kind of just running every little project. There's a skills project here, there's an enterprise development project there, supply development, but they're all discrete short-term projects. I think what you're alluding to is how do we drive it as a program? How do we get integration, line of sight, start to introduce sustainability and integrate the different components?
100%. So previously it was known as CSI, Corporate Social Investment. It's now known as Socioeconomic Development. And what classifies a project as a socioeconomic development that a company can spend on? And so the contributions must be made to Black individuals. Black under BEE terms is classified as African, colored, and Indian. It's also Chinese as long as they were within the country before 1994. It's also, and when you're looking at socioeconomic development, you know, so again, unfortunately, we live in South Africa, and there's always these pockets of people just trying to grab, you know, for their own benefit. And so for socioeconomic development, companies really need to start looking at, if they are putting money towards SED, what is the impact that that project is going to have on the beneficiaries, number one, or the community at large? Because at the end of the day, it's socioeconomic development, which means that you want to improve the lives of the underprivileged South Africans in an impactful way. You also want to promote transformation, diversity, and include Black people within various industries. But to ensure that you really are not just throwing money at something, and, you know, I'm going to touch on something that might be very offensive to some people, but I've come across businesses who have been for years just giving 20,000, 30,000 to an orphanage. And yes, the orphanages do need that, but how true is that transformation? How true, you know, what is the impact by just giving the money to that orphanage? Why don't you take a step further and say, you know, sit down with the orphanage and find out that what are your operational expenses? How can we assist you? If you have an orphanage, what ages are your kids starting from and ranging from? So if you have kids in an orphanage that are ranging from 6 months old right up to matriculants, and I know a number of these types of orphanages, then why don't you as a business say, we'll continue funding you, but we would actually like to put programs in place where we bring early childhood development in. And you know, I had a discussion last month with Cotlands. Cotlands has a toy library, which not most people out there don't know what toy libraries are. And they develop ECD practitioners, the early childhood development practitioners. And you can go out and you can spend on a program with Cotlands that is accredited for early childhood development. There you tick the points off for your skills development because it's accredited training provider. You then can tick the points under enterprise development by giving them funding towards perhaps providing meals for these kids that are at the orphanage. You can then also take a step further and say, okay, so as my organization, I need to actually spend on bursaries. What are your kids that are now matriculating at this orphanage? What is the next step for them? You know, let's better their lives and then say, well, the kids that are at the orphanage who do make it past matric, let's offer them a bursary. And by that, you know, you're actually uplifting these kids and you're giving them an opportunity in life. And that is what socioeconomic development is all about. It is not just about throwing money at what you think is going to solve the problem. It won't solve the problem unless you get involved. And again, it's the mind shift. It's the mind shift that has to take place there.
Yeah, I think mind shift is so important. I'm conscious of our time and we've got a bit more to cover. You know, the opportunity for us, I think, as practitioners again, in the industry serving the corporate and the beneficiaries is to find the best practices, find things that work, and find ways of scaling that. So the large corporates do a good job. How do we learn from them and apply it to the next level? Should we move to the next stage? And again, just conscious of a little bit of time from our side. But again, from a financial perspective, a significant amount of money is available in the system.
Exactly. And 5 points are available for, you know, spending on socioeconomic development. And again, you know, I've spoken about the skills development. Companies have to comply with the skills development, whether it's internally or externally. And this, again, can be used. Develop your supply chain. If you have Black suppliers within your supply chain, or just doesn't even have, well, we are talking about BEE, so it has to be Black suppliers, but you can spend on them by upskilling them, put them on courses that would assist them in growing and developing their business. Finance for non-financial managers is so important for entrepreneurs. So it's important for us to understand the skills development scorecard. And if we look at the scorecard, you're able to see the different elements here that companies have to spend on. So if we look at the first one, expenditure for Black people as a percentage of the leviable amount, that category is purely for your employees within the organization. So whatever spend, you have to spend 3.5% of your leviable amount. I'm not going to go into the technical calculations of all of that, but you would get 6 points by ensuring that 3.5% of your leviable amount is spent on your own internal Black staff. Bursaries, so this is bursaries.
Just quickly, what is the leviable amount?
So
Tania?
the leviable amount, people do tend to get confused with the leviable amount because often it is seen as the total cost of your employees. So it's your skills development levy that is paid over to SARS. But when you're looking at the payroll, there's a lot of other things that are calculated in that. So the actual calculation is your total employee cost, which is the STL, times 100. So you get to that amount. And again, this type of technical calculation, your BEE consultant helps you to derive what exactly is that spend. It varies across different companies. So the second one, which is the bursaries, government brought this in play in December 2019, where they brought this particular element in, and it was to address the fees must fall issue. They found a loophole in BEE where they could force companies to pay for this. So while companies, and look, this is really applicable to your generic companies, it's compulsory for them to spend on bursaries. And it is for, it can be for employees within the organization, but for generic companies which have a turnover more than 50 million, they have to spend on learners who are studying at institutions. And there's strict criteria in terms of the evidence you produce to show that you have funded learners at universities. You then have your expenditure on Black employees who have disabilities. Again, we have to develop disabled individuals that are within our country, and it's important to give them opportunities. You then have your learnerships, apprenticeships, and internships, which then form part of your, it's 6 points that you would get there. And then again, if you, with learnerships specifically, or apprenticeships and internships, if you have a learner on one of those programs and you're funding them, try to work towards giving them permanent employment, whether it is with your organization or with another organization, maybe one even inside your supply chain. They can become an employee within your supply chain, and you would then get additional bonus points for ensuring that there was a permanent position provided to these learners on these programs. So it's important to understand how you again integrate your skills development with your supply chain, as well as your enterprise and supplier development. I don't know if we want to pause there for questions, or we'll carry on.
So I think let's carry on, because we've got a short amount of time left. So we'll run through some of this a little bit quicker. You'll see everybody later on that we will give you a QR code that you can scan to fill in a form. Liesel's been posting in the chat the access to the form. So if you want to talk about any of this in a bit more detail and chat to Tania or I, then please fill in the form and let us know. But let's kind of shift this. So I think what we're saying is there's incredibly powerful, effective legislation and policy in place. We actually have a tremendous amount of BE practitioners, skills practitioners. We unfortunately have a massive unemployment problem. We have a tremendous amount of small businesses, both informal as well as small businesses that are failing or struggling to survive. So whilst we have the mechanisms and the funding in place and the capabilities, what we want to talk through very briefly now is how do we drive exponential change, exponential empowerment, and look at it as an ecosystem. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Tania. So really, the fundamental still is we really should shift to a strategic conversation. Let's use compliance as a strategic tool, and let's make sure that we shift from a more linear, incremental mindset where every project maybe gives you 10 or 20 or even 100% return, to how do we get that 10x, and how do we use the power of technology and new business models, the exponential innovation capabilities to empower the skills in the SMEs, again, giving them a 10x and ultimately giving the ecosystem a 10x. Next slide, please. So the opportunity, and we've put a lot of thought and experimentation and refinement into understanding the ecosystem and how do we go about this. And large corporates, globally and locally, they are all going on through these transformation exercises. They're all looking at how do they leverage technology, 4IR, all these buzzwords, but meaningfully, they're looking at it and saying, how do we get that 10x, that multiplier? What's important, and the way they go about doing that is they look at the future. They set a direction, right? So there's got to be a longer term outcome and direction that you're setting. And it needs to be a mission. It needs to be something that is common, that galvanizes the ecosystem in a common direction, right? So the first step that we need to look at is how do we set that future and then look at the next step. So think big, start small, but create it as a mission that galvanizes the ecosystem and transforms the ecosystem holistically. So that's one of the critical things that we see to be able to address our unemployment and specifically address the small, medium, micro enterprise sector. And obviously to do that, the other critical things is we've got to get the right principles in place. So things like inclusivity, it has to be shared. It has to be inclusive. It's not about the little startup and entrepreneur disrupting the big guy necessarily. Why don't we find a way to say, well, how do we get that entrepreneur who's able to create a disruptive innovation that drives growth, but how do we make sure that it's inclusive and that the small guys that don't have access to all the funding actually participate in the wealth creation, as well as obviously the participation and access to the market. And to do that, it's very simple. As businesses, we all understand customer experience. If we treat our customers, put them at the center, treat them well, give them good service, give them good value, they will come back and you will get loyal customers. Same principle. Our customers in this transformation journey and in BEE are the skills and the small micro enterprises, small, medium, micro enterprise. So let's put them at the center of the journey and transform with them growing, being inclusive. Next slide, please.
Thanks. I just want to quickly mention that, and that's what BBBEE is about. It's about putting the smaller businesses in the center of everything. It's for their development, because if we develop them, we uplift the unemployment rate, we uplift communities, and we basically grow the economy. So it's vitally important to look at exponential growth and how we can actually achieve that.
Yeah, and to that point, how do we go about doing this? And it's an imperative. We could argue, I think it's been an imperative for a long time. I think COVID has made it an explicit imperative. We cannot ignore it anymore. And the imperative is we really have to address unemployment and inclusivity. We're in trouble if we don't. We have a triple crisis. So how do we do this? We need to be able to industrialize both the innovation process and development. In other words, how do we make it consistent, systemic, continuous? At the moment, it's very fragmented. There's a tremendous amount of work going on, but it's fragmented, it's duplicated, it's not continuous, it's not integrated in the whole. So the first part of it is that mindset again of how do we industrialize this? So back to, we've got skills development, socio-economic development, enterprise development, supply development. There's all those pools of funding from one corporate. How do we syndicate the funding? But then every large corporate has a large corporate customer or a large corporate supplier or other partners. Imagine if we could syndicate funding across multiple organizations and across multiple disciplines, and then use that to do some of the early risk development that allows us to build capability that then attracts venture capital and private equity and debt funding, which is less risk happy. So critically to this, we need to be syndicating funding. Second to that, we then need to aggregate. If we could take 3 or 4 of your programs that you've done, just as a simple example, Tania, and we could do them 5 times or 10 times. So let's go and find another set of organizations. Let's scale those projects and those programs and aggregate it. what that also means is if we do that, then that 5,000 Rand an hour lawyer or the technology expert or the financial accountant that normally the small micro enterprises can't get access to, if we're aggregating those, we're able to then gear the expensive resources that are normally only exclusively accessible by the big corporates and make it available. And then make sure, again, the principles and the values of the transformation journey are very explicit in terms of it has to be broad-based. We have to get initiatives that the small micro enterprises don't just want to be part of the supply chain. We need to build their businesses, and we need to build new value where they are the majority shareholders. And I use a very simple example, Amazon. Jeff Bezos kind of oscillates between the first, second, third richest man in the world on the back of the value of Amazon. Amazon as a business is worth more in its market capitalization than lots of countries are able to produce. Now imagine if we had our own Amazons, and some small ones and big ones, but the micro, small, medium enterprises owned Amazon, and that wealth was now broad-based and distributed. So again, designing for those principles become very important. So a holistic, systemic outside-in approach, very, very important. And then through the different codes, how do we bridge enterprises through a small, medium, micro marketplace of entities that links the ventures, the small, medium, micro enterprises, as well as the townships and the informal sector. We've got to build these bridges together and do it cohesively. To do that, we need to accelerate ventures. We need to empower the SMEs and sustain jobs at the same time. So it's a little bit more complex, but it's very doable. Next slide, please.
And it definitely is doable. And I'm going to use myself as an example. I specialize in skills development, and it's across sectors, it's across various companies. Skills development is generic, so it's just understanding how to implement the skills. But I don't, and I often used to get, some people used to say to me, you share too much information, you give away too much of your secrets. And at the end of the day, the pie is just so big. We have a whole country that we have to look at developing, and uplifting communities. We've got a lot of disadvantaged communities in our country. And if I had to have that selfish mindset and not share my knowledge and not go out there and say, oh, you're upcoming SDF, skills development facilitator, and who's asking me for guidance or asking me how do they do this, we won't grow. So we need to collaborate. And the pie, and when I say the pie is so big, if you look at the amount of skills development facilitators at the moment in the country, it is fluctuated. It's saturated. But we need to share our knowledge. So what I do is I actually bring in a range of different skills development facilitators, and I teach them, because I've been lucky to gain experience across various elements within the skills space. I'm able to direct them and see where does their strength lie. Let me teach them how to do a specific process, because by me teaching them means I can go out and get more business for both of us or for 10 of us. If I am able to give that work, teach them how to do it, give them the work to do, coach and guide, but then it gives me the ability to go out and go and sell more services, to come back and say, well, now I'm not only feeding myself, I'm actually feeding a whole lot of other families by giving them that opportunity. And because I have the understanding of skill of the BEE side, I can approach companies confidently and speak to them about enterprise development and getting them to spend under enterprise development. But now opening up my ecosystem and looking at all the SMEs out there and saying to them, guys, come through and have a chat with me. Tell me what your business does. Let me understand what it does, and let me connect you, not taking any fee, because there are a lot of companies out there that take a fee for enterprise development, but not taking a fee because I know that at the end of the day, by me introducing their business to a company that has to comply with BEE, both parties are benefiting. And hey, who knows, they might come back to me and say, we need to implement skills development. So, or we'd like to develop them. How can we do that? So again, it's looking, it's not looking at it in silos anymore. And again, your socioeconomic development, looking at the projects like Kotlin, who are really on the ground developing our children, who are going to be our future workforce. So, it's going and looking at the impact that they have, and how do we ensure that the impact is reaching our women, our children, and our communities. But by me going out and educating a whole lot of other skills development facilitators, I'm not looking at it as they are competitors to me. They are competitors, but I need to educate them and guide them so that we can all grow. And that takes us into understanding your slide.
Thanks, Tania. And I think fantastic, right? So if we have the right mindsets, we're working towards inclusive, we're sharing, we're collaborating, we have the same purpose and objectives, which has to be similar. We all want to be safe. We want our children and our families and our friends to be safe. We want to make sure everybody has quality lifestyle, that we can actually have happy lives, right? So when we start driving towards that conversation, we can start to believe in the ability to integrate and leverage BE for good. And again, that's powerful. Now, if we use what the technology and the exponential technologies and business models can do, if we are looking at the future and the future marketplace that is digitized. So again, if a big corporate is digital and the small micro enterprise is manual in its business model, it's going to not be included, right? It's going to slow down the big corporates, and the big corporate's going to say, this is expensive, this is hard to deal with us. We actually, we know we have to comply, but this is costly and expensive, and then they don't give it attention. But if we could digitize, standardize and digitize, productize a small, medium, micro enterprise, think of it like a franchise, and we could build a capability around that, automate that, and then instead of trying to get every little enterprise to be a big enterprise, maybe we can standardize it and get lots of little enterprises working together as if they were a big enterprise. That would bring value to the big corporate, because the corporate says, I'm ordering 100 chairs from 10 little chair manufacturers, but I'm getting the same consistent quality and response, right? For the small enterprise, they're actually able to participate, grow their business, but they can also manage within their constraints. So building that SME marketplace and creating the vision to do that and orchestrating the value. Again, Uber is an abused example, but it actually makes sense. How do we get lots of vehicles, lots of drivers, and match supply and demand between commuters and vehicles and drivers for value at a consistent way? If we apply that in our value chains between the large established industry players into building SME marketplaces that also build bridges to the underserved markets, that's on the right-hand side. How do we envisage that? How do we move towards that? How do we define that for shared and inclusive value? Then we go on to the left-hand side of the picture and say, well, what's the approach? Well, we need to syndicate funding. We have thousands, tens of thousands of practitioners and organizations. So again, Tania, if I could use you as an example, if we could take what you do, take your knowledge, put it into an AI tool set, and scale your knowledge to another 10,000 practitioners and BE practitioners and consultants and skills development organizations, and you got a rand for each one, you're actually making money out of your knowledge, you're sharing, but you're also growing the pie for everybody, and you're helping the other guys to deliver a valuable service as well. So how do we aggregate the service providers? How do we syndicate the funding? And how do we systematically from seed to scale? So too many projects start, but very little go all the way through to scale. How do we go to seed to scale and make sure that the beneficiaries are benefiting? The next slide, please. So just as a very simple and very quick example, we did quite an extensive amount of work around the concept of a commuter marketplace. All right, looking at that previous picture. On the left-hand side, the idea was to build a marketplace that comprised the small, medium, micro enterprises. The intent is very clear that the SMEs would own that marketplace and the innovations around it, and they would serve the corporates on the one hand, and they would serve the commuters on the other hand. From a corporate point of view, you're getting the ability to educate your employees. So if you could create businesses, digital tech businesses around the journey, the trip from work and back every single day. Imagine if the corporates could educate their employees and allow the employees to be productive while they're sitting on the commute journey. It would be more cost effective to them. It would allow the employees to have a better quality of life and would overall improve productivity. Another example would be, how do you make sure that the employees are safe in their journeys backwards and back and forth between home places? You would also get a lot of insights, and to some organizations, you create an alternate channel where you can actually access the commuters. So that was just one example of 3 or 4. And then if you look at it from the commuter and the customer point of view, how do you take a journey? In the morning, you place your order so that when you get home again, you can pick up your groceries. On the way, you can do your education and your learning about the latest procedures, health and safety, product development discussion. And on the way home, you're tired and you can get some entertainment. So a couple of examples of, by looking at it holistically, standardizing, productizing, and digitizing it, you're able to do that consistently, but then scale it for the multiplier. And that's the opportunity. So it really comes down to all of us to think together, to be open to collaboration at all layers of the ecosystem, and to approach this as an ecosystem and a journey that we're all going on.
Thank you. And I think also, sorry, Shane, it's understanding that we can collaborate. All of us as practitioners, whether you're in the BE space or in the skills development space, we can all collaborate and work together so that we can fulfill the purpose that we all have, which is for transformation and for economic development. But it takes that mind shift from not considering your colleagues or that you're seeing them as competitors all the time. You're all providing the same services to these businesses. So let's collaborate. If I know I have a client, but I can't service them, why be selfish and know that my competitor has a service that they can provide? We need to collaborate, and I think we really need to just shift from that mindset of just working in silos.
So thank you. Yes, I think in conclusion, and from my side, we've got 10 million plus people unemployed. We have 80 million learners coming through every year, another million odd at, say, the age of 18, 19, coming into post-school education, and then from there, if they have access. So we have a massive unemployment problem, and it continuously gets bigger and bigger every year. We have an obligation and an imperative across the whole ecosystem to make a difference. There's a massive amount of money. There's great policy in place if we align it properly. It really comes down to being open-minded and collaborating. So please, if you'd like to chat to us a little bit more, scan the QR code and get in touch with us. Liesl, over to you.
Just before Liesl comes
Thank you very much. Sorry, yes, Tania, we are short of time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just the link there. Everyone can also just go. If they don't scan the QR code, just click on the link. I think Liesl has dropped it in the chat, and engage with us if you are interested. Over to you, Liesl.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. There's been a complaint about not being able to see the content on the Chuka slides. Just a note on that. We deliberately did it like that, the concept being discussed. And please do reach out to us via the registration link that's been shared. I know that Shane will be more than happy to talk you through the detail in that. So there's been a number of questions. We have a few minutes for that. Is asking that, say for instance, I was a white South African who wants to start a EME, family operating. Can I do business in South Africa with no B-BBEE certification, though my business will involve almost all sections of South African government? Tania, maybe that's for you.
So, it has been difficult for white ownership of small businesses, but I mean, you can collaborate, you can continue to still collaborate with other Black businesses out there. Unfortunately, with the legislation of BBBEE, the money and funding that you can get out of BEE is specifically only geared towards your Black ownerships. But there's different ways that you can also, and I'm speaking now as a white-owned business, where you can have, you can reach a BEE level where you do have Black ownership as well, but you as the white owner can still hold control of the business. So an example of that is if you were to hold 49% of the shareholding of the business, and a lot of white owners would say, oh, no, but then I lose control of my business. No, you don't have to. You can have 51% shareholding, which is Black shareholding, but it can be split. So it can be split across, let's say, for example, 3 shareholders, where that 51% is split across each of them. You as the white owner will still have 49% shareholding, which is more than all of the 3 that would have their shareholding. But their 3 combined then gives the 51% Black shareholding, and that will then accelerate you in terms of your BEE level. So there is opportunities. Again, also, I work with a lot of white businesses as well. So in terms of their growth, what does a small business need when you're growing? You need more hands. And how do you get more hands without incurring the cost? Through these learnerships, through these YES programs, I place a lot of these learners into small white businesses, into Black businesses. It gives you a set of hands, and under BEE, the hosting company is not restricted as to whether that must be Black or whether it must be white. So there definitely are opportunities for you to engage within the BEE space, but it does take an understanding, and that's where you can reach out to us through the links that Liesl has given in terms of understanding how can you navigate this space.
So if I can maybe come in.
Yes.
If I apply the exponential thinking in different business models, so as a white-owned EME, you are by default to level 4. It's quite easy now to, if you register your business with the Biz Portal, you can actually get your BEE certificate automatically issued, etc. So absolutely yes. And then in terms of preferential procurement, you know, there's still an intent to buy from EMEs and small businesses as part of the legislation. As Tania says, you won't get the money directly as a white-owned business. But if we had to change the conversation, instead of, say, necessarily giving away 51% of your business, because that doesn't always come naturally, you're kind of saying you're investing. Another opportunity would be, say, well, why don't we create a platform business model? Or why don't we create a franchise model that is digitized and automated? So you've built your business, you know the process, you've tested it, you've proven it, but then how do we scale that business by 10? And instead of you growing 10 times, if you created 10 other businesses that are Black-owned businesses in the majority that are leveraging your recipe, again, think franchise model, then you have the ability through digitization to orchestrate the value of it, to make sure the quality and the standards and those aspects are implemented, but then you can grow your pie as well and share in a smaller piece of the other providers, but still share in the pie and grow your business. So there are ways of developing business models that allow you to scale incrementally, address and deal with BE, as well as take advantage of the development funding in place. So that's really the kinds of thinking that we're doing at Looker, is how do we use business models and technology to scale and make sure, again, that it's shared and inclusive.
Yes, and just
Sorry, Tania, we need to move on to some other. Tania, we need to move on to some other questions, please. We've got quite a few questions which I would like to get to, if that's okay with you. So we have Avatif Daniels. How does BEE affect universities? I'm a prospect researcher, and to look at corporates to fund university prospects. Who would like to have a go at that one?
So to fund, it really is dependent on the type of research. If I look at one of my companies who's a multinational in the pharmaceutical and home and hygiene space, they definitely have to, they've got an R&D department. So they would definitely collaborate if there is a project that specifically speaks to their core business. Again, I would also say, look at the SETAs, because the SETAs are mandated to work together with universities, and so there might be funding that side as well. There is funding that comes through for research and development. I think don't depend on B-BBEE for research and development spend. There's other avenues that you can tap into that funding.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Martina, earlier, yes, Shane?
No, sorry, carry on. I think we've got quite a few questions. We can address them. Carry on, sorry.
Martina earlier asked the question about the difference between an NPO and an NGO, which we did answer in the chat. Her follow-up question is, her concern is there would be more of reservation to support an NPO over an NGO, as from what she understands, there's a difference in tax implication, meaning donations towards NGO can be tax exempt while NPO are not. Is that correct?
So I think if I can take this one, Shane can add after that.
Please.
Try not to go into too much of the technicalities in terms of the NPO and NGO. Yes, there is that tax benefit that a company can obtain. However, if the NPO's purpose is reaching the development of a community and uplifting that community, then a business would more likely go towards assisting that type of project. Irrespective, I've seen many companies fund a project that doesn't have, they ask the question, can we get a tax certificate from you? And they say no, and okay, we're fine to continue, we'll still fund the project. So I think it really boils down to what is the project and what is its
and I think the corporate funders, it's not law necessarily always that you have to, your socioeconomic development has to go to an NGO, an NPO, or a combination. It does come down to the policy and the principle that the funder puts in place. And they will make exceptions from time to time. Again, if we work smartly, there is the ability to set up entities that are actually owned by the beneficiaries, right? So again, instead of us setting up a business that everything goes to the NPO and or the NGO, and then there's beneficiaries, why don't we create a business that represents the beneficiaries as a collective, as a cooperative, or as a joint business, and then the funding can flow and the tax benefits for sending the money in the right way can be done. And then the NGO can help develop a community-owned entity that also has it. So again, if we look at the business model, there's opportunity to leverage all of this, but also create wealth and value beyond just the one transaction.
Okay, great. Thank you. If we just go to a few more questions here, we've got a couple more minutes left. And there was a question from Police Wameko, one of our beautiful Democratizing Entrepreneurship community members. It's more a statement, but I think, Shane, you'll be the right person to respond to this. She says access to market is a big challenge. How can the Khluka model assist this? And what other advice do you have?
Yeah, so that's exactly the challenge we're looking to overcome. There's the intent of the marketplaces is to be able to match supply and demand in a very simple sense. What we're not trying to do is to go to one corporate at a time and say, well, let's just build your marketplace only. That for the big corporates, that would make sense. But if I take categories of supply, every corporate needs IT, HR, infrastructure, facilities. So there's a lot of capabilities that need to be provided and capacity. So literally, it's about us working together. We've got about 10 initiatives that we've self-started, looking at different industries. So I'll use the security cluster as an example. There's convergence between physical security service providers and digital. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, let's get together. Let's go to the SETAs. Let's go to the security authority that you need to register with in the industry and the body. let's start collaborating between the security and the MICT, the IT sectors, and let's with that get the large corporates together as the incumbents and the established providers, and then let's start looking at aggregating the different providers and solution providers and systematically build the marketplace that matches supply and demand, but then also matches the development. So it is about us identifying certain catalyst leaders and building an ecosystem of beneficiaries, providers, and corporates, and doing it together. It's hard work. It does take a little bit of time, but if we started in the small, we demonstrate it, and then we market the initiative in the marketplace, we'll get the scale that we need. So we've got methods and techniques that we deploy to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. And then the last one, we are going to respond, make sure via email we respond to the remainder of the questions, but we are out of time. One last question though. Malebo made this comment right at the beginning of the masterclass. He asked, does BEE still have a future in South Africa? We are seeing a lot of policy and legislature amendments focusing on the business sector. So is there a future for BEE in South Africa if we look forward to 2030, 2050? Shane?
Can I take a first stab at it? I think our country's challenges are vast. So whether we call it BEE or whether we just make it sustainability and purpose-driven transformation, which the rest of the world does, we need to do what BEE is intended and designed to do. And we have a long journey before we can take that 10 million odd cohort of unemployed people and drive inclusivity. We've got to get the average income above the food poverty line. At the moment, the average spend on food is below the cost of a basket. So my opinion on it and perspective on it is we have a massive journey to do, and it's going to take us many, many, many years before we can do this. We just need to hurry up and do it faster. Yeah. And again, that's the idea of the exponential. So yes, in kind, it will be in place for a long time, and it needs to be.
Needs to be. Agreed. 100% agreed.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to thank our guest speakers in a moment. But before we do leave, I just want to quickly talk to you about what's coming up next. We have a wonderful masterclass, and I've shared the registration link, where Jody Hill is going to talk to us about cheating time. Now, it's not a time management masterclass this. She's going to help us to get one day right in our work life and then to work towards duplicating that. So register for that masterclass next week. If you would like to contact Craig and myself to talk to us about what the DE community does, here's our email addresses. I'll share that shortly with you in the chat as well. And then also, if you would like to join us to become a guest speaker, to view our recordings from all the assets from our previous masterclasses, there's a link there. And also we have our LinkedIn community. I'll share all of that in a moment in the chat. Now, with all of that said, I think we had a wonderful, wonderful masterclass. It was very, very the comments and the chats that's taken place and the questions that were to you. On all of those questions, Tania and Shane will definitely get around to that. I want to thank Tania and Shane for the time they took out to be with our Democratizing Entrepreneurship community and the EXO Futures Academy this morning. We've learned a lot. I'm going to share the links where everybody can get hold of you again as well. As Hybe Warren says in the chat, thank you for a very, very informative session. Tania, a last few words.
Fantastic. Thank you, Liesl, and thank you to EXO Futures for hosting us today and allowing us to do this masterclass and to share our knowledge and our experience. And I hope that we've opened up a world of opportunity and awoken you to the possibilities that you can utilize BBBEE for. And please reach out to us. The links have been given to you. Reach out to myself or to Craig to assist you and just help you to accelerate and grow your business. And let's collaborate. Thank you, Liesl. And thank you, Shane.
Yeah, I'd like to
echo that. Much. Yes.
I'd like to echo that. EXO Futures, thank you, Craig Liesl, for putting on this platform. I think it's a great way for us to share some of our knowledge, some of our ideas, some of our experience, and grow together. So really, thanks very much, Tania. Great having a chat with you. Quite enjoyed the conversation. And to the participants, thanks for your questions. Thanks for listening in, and look forward to changing the world together with everyone. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. I think I just shared everything privately with you, Liswa. So let me just quickly correct that, if you don't mind, because I'm also responding to some private chats here. Let me quickly make sure that I've got all the links in there. So we will have all the assets of this masterclass available to you by close of business on Monday, and we will send everybody a follow-up email from today. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate that you all joined us here this morning. Wonderful, wonderful weekend.